All right, welcome to another episode of Bridging the Gap podcast. This is JR alongside Stanley and Pope. And something that is current and in the media is Juneteenth. Something
Hmm.
that a lot of black people aren't aware of or don't know the meaning of.
Right.
So we have two special guests here who are going to help us to break down what Juneteenth mean for them as black men and their meaning of it. And I want to
Yeah.
start with you, Stanley. I don't know if you want to, you know,
Yeah, sure.
just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So, Stanley Fritz. I'm actually Haitian, so Black American Haitian. Mother's Haitian. My dad's from Dominica, but I was raised in the States, and I didn't even learn about Juneteenth until about I was 18 and 19 years old. I work in politics, so that's what I do.
All right, politics.
Yeah.
Cool. We're going to come back to that.
All right.
Pope?
I'm Pope. I am an educator. I teach high school English. I am African American, as some would call it. My family, like I'm from New York. My parents are from New York. My grandparents are from down south. My family is rooted here in America.
All
Like
right.
we took the boat to the last stop.
You took the boat to the last. That's something that's interesting because you said something that's kind of interesting to me. You're American
Right,
as far back as you can go.
right.
Why do you consider yourself African American instead of just an American?
Well,
I never
well,
understood
honestly,
that part of it. As
Honestly,
black
I,
people.
I only I only use that term for the fact that it's podcast. Like typically when I describe myself as indigenous because we've been here from the beginning, not American, we were here before America was actually established. So African American is just a term that's coined. It's not something that I I don't check the, you know how you have those applications and they ask you check about, I don't check African American. You know what I'm saying? So um yeah.
All right. So as an educator, and we're in this forum now to educate.
Right.
So I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
What is Juneteenth?
All right, so Juneteenth is so some people misconstrue it with the actual date that slaves were freed. It's not the actual date that slaves were freed. It's the date in which slaves who didn't know they were free found out that they were free.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the first thing. So that's why it's celebrated because those of us who it's like me and you know that we're free, and Stan is over there, and he has no idea, and he's still, still in his servitude, right? And he finally finds out. So now he has this awakening. So because now all of us have finally figured out that we are now free, that's why it's a celebration. It's because everyone knows, everyone has taken hold of that liberation. That's first.
All right. Thanks for that, Stanley.
Yeah.
Now, you're free. What does Juneteenth mean to you as a black man whose parents are from the Caribbean,
Yeah.
Haiti and Dominica?
So Juneteenth is a date that I resonate with as like someone who it's not directly my story, but I can understand it and appreciate it. When I think of Juneteenth, like I think about the Haitian Revolution when we finally had defeated the French and the Spanish, and we was like, all right, this is our island. White people can't own nothing here. Get out. This is ours. Juneteenth for Black Americans is it's about like that's the day where like the Union got to the farthest reaches of the country, and we're finally like folks are free. And they didn't have anything, just like people in Haiti didn't have anything at the end of that war. Everything was pretty much dust and stone because of all the fighting it took to get that freedom, and they had to start from scratch and make something out of nothing. And I see that as a moment of like making something out of nothing, but making that nothing beautiful because you have each other and you have your freedom, so you have limitless possibilities.
Appreciate that, and I agree with you. Now, earlier, Pope, you were telling me about some of the importance of Juneteenth and the why we drink some of the drink. Because I saw you with a strawberry
Right, right. Okay, so
flavor drink. So just give us some history on that.
all right, cool. So one of one of the celebrations of Juneteenth is you're supposed to drink a beverage that is strawberry flavored, or if you can't have a strawberry flavored beverage, drink that is red. All right, and the purpose of drinking something that is red or a strawberry flavored beverage is because when the ancestors first arrived here in America, what they brought with them on the slave ships was cola nuts, and the cola nuts actually they used it for nourishment. They made drinks with them, and the drinks that they made had uh, different health benefits, and the drink was red from those cola nuts. Now here in the United States, cola nuts isn't something that you would find here in this land. So to replicate that, different things were used over time because you didn't have access to the cola nuts. So you had like hibiscus tea that was used as a red drink. Then later on, you had a African American man who made strawberry flavored soda, and
Wow.
yeah, and so on Juneteenth, you either have strawberry flavored soda or preferably cola nuts, a drink made from the cola nuts. But when you don't have access to that, the strawberry flavored soda or the hibiscus tea. If you don't have access to any of those things, then to show appreciation or respect to those ancestors who survived the journey and paved the way for us, you would drink something that is strawberry flavored.
So for those of you who didn't know, now you know. Strawberry flavored drink on Juneteenth. That's very important.
Correct. Or or a red drink
Or
if you
red
don't
drink.
have red.
Now, Stanley, as somebody who is involved in politics, right? What you think has been the reason why it is taken, why so much people, one, don't know about Juneteenth, black people, which is something that affects us all, and two, um, the political implications of why this wasn't celebrated more.
You curse on the show?
Of course,
All right, just making sure.
of course, of course.
So I'll give you a quick answer, and I'll give you an answer that's not as quick. The quick answer is white people. The longer answer is like we're living in a world. Pretty much the entire whole country has had its ideas about history, heroes, villains, good guys, bad guys, right and wrong, dictated by a Western European white centric point of view. And if you're going to be recapping on the history of the world and of life from a white man's point of view, you're not going to include a black person's history or their story. It doesn't matter. It doesn't exist. And if you're not looking as black people as actually human beings, why would you then add their story to the larger narrative of what the world is going to be? Because once you add that narrative in there, then you have to acknowledge that they have done something or they are something. And if they've done something and they are something, how can you justify how you treated them? And one of the best ways to make sure people feel like they deserve nothing is to erase their history, erase their agency, make them feel like they have nothing. And one of the amazing tricks of white supremacy has been the ability to strip away everything good from black people through the interpretation of how other people see black people. So Juneteenth, the real stories of Martin Luther King, Fannie Lou Hamer, civil rights activists, the stories of what happened in Guyana or in Jamaica independence or in Haitian independence, those stories cannot be told. Because if you tell them, you have to start answering a lot of other questions like, why is it when after Haiti defeated France and Spain, the U.S. froze trade with Haiti and would not acknowledge them as a country because there were only black people there? Or you have to ask questions like, why was it that folks were promised 40 acres and a mule, but then after a couple of years, they gave power back to white Southern Democrats and then took the Union out of Southern countries and killed a whole bunch of black people? You don't want to answer those questions because if you have to answer them, you have to acknowledge that your ancestors, your grandfathers, your great grandfathers, your aunties, your mothers, they're all garbage. And who wants to say that?
Wow, that is a lot. Now, as an educator, Pope, how do we now start to get the message out and to get to other young black men like ourselves to realize that, hey, we do have a history, we are important, we are where we are. And not just you, but I also want you to answer that also because you're in politics. But I want to start with you first, Pope.
I mean, of like you said, as an educator, one of the first things that we need to understand is that that's where it starts. Is the education of in the molding of those young minds. For me, I'm not new to Juneteenth, Kwanzaa, or any of the historically black celebrations that take place here because it is something that I learned from very young. And I had the privilege of not only learning this in my own household from my parents and my family, but also from my form teachers in my formative years. I had, I had black teachers for the most part, and I had pro black teachers. So they taught me our history. They taught me the things that weren't in the history books that were written out, as Stan said, that was essentially they tried to erase. And it's one of those things that is told, like, like the griots in Africa, where it's something where they learn something and then they pay it forward by speaking it. It's a knowledge that isn't written down, but it's in the mind. That's basically what they did. And I keep bumping this mic. Sorry.
It's
And
fine. Don't worry
anyway,
about that.
anyways, and so with that, it's the same thing. A lot of students or a lot of young minds don't have access to that knowledge because the people that are teaching them either don't know or they don't want to acknowledge it. And because of that, they're taught that all of these other holidays that really have no importance to them, that's what they're supposed to celebrate. They don't understand that things that are important to their culture, to think to their families, they can celebrate even if the world doesn't celebrate. And if you celebrate it, if your people celebrates it, eventually the rest of the world will have no choice but to acknowledge it. And that's something that is taking place now.
Yeah. So how can we, and the same question, how can we move that cursor from just a situation where a few of us know about it?
Yeah.
Because that is something that I think is holding us back as black men. He had teachers, and I guess you would have had parents who were probably pro black and were able to tell you stuff.
I mean, no, actually, my parents. I didn't grow up with my mom. My dad was not pro-black. He wasn't anti-black, but he was like, he's a Caribbean man. He's like, you go to school or you get a job. That's all you had. That's all you could do. And then when you get old enough, get a union job somewhere so you can get a pension. You can retire and you take care of your people. If you have a woman, take care of her. That was all he cared about. Really, but like my politics started to shift when I turned 17 and I read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And then I was like, oh, what is this? And then after that, I started to dig deeper and deeper. So we all weren't lucky enough to learn when we were younger. That's okay though, because a lot of us didn't know. But now you get to know, like Pope is talking about here with the grill. Like we all have the ability to go and share this information with other people. Also, something you guys should know is in New York State, Assemblywoman Alicia Hyman presented a Juneteenth bill that would make Juneteenth a state holiday in New York. So she proposed that bill back on June 6th. The governor then announced that he made an executive order to have Juneteenth be a holiday for all state offices, so those offices will be closed. And then more than likely, when the legislature comes back into session in a couple of weeks, they're going to vote on this Juneteenth bill, so it'll be a statewide law. There's also language in Congress right now to make it a national law or federal law, but you got Republicans in the Senate and Donald Trump, so they took Harriet Tubman off the 20. They're not going to give you Juneteenth.
My final question before we wrap up this discussion
Mm-hmm.
is we have Black History Month, which is February, the shortest month in the year.
Black
How
History
much?
Month is all year.
How much of that? Yeah, it should be all year. But how much of that you think is responsible for us not well for more of our history not being taught to us throughout the year? So people wouldn't know about Juneteenth because so much effort is put into February. Are we doing ourselves and our kids, grandkids a disservice by only focusing on February for Black History Month?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And like it wasn't even a month to begin with. It was like a Negro History Week,
Right.
and then they expanded it to a month, and it
The
wasn't,
shortest month of the year.
yeah.
All kinds of problematic things that we go into a rabbit hole discussing as to why Black History Month is the month that it is, and trying to cram all of Black history into 1 month. Black history is American history.
Yeah.
There's not a single thing that you can pinpoint that has occurred within the United States since its inception and the years prior to its inception that hasn't included Black people, whether they are indigenous or whether they traveled from the Caribbean or whether they traveled from the motherland.
And let me just add on to that, like the way that white supremacy is in everything and it's everywhere, you can't go anywhere to escape white supremacy. There's no way you can escape the black contribution or the black collateral damage in this American history. So like let's use Wall Street, my favorite thing to talk about, right? So on Wall Street, back when they still had the slave trade, they used to bring the slaves right there at Wall Street and people could buy them. But like say for instance, JR, you didn't have the money for a slave, right? So you said, damn, I don't have enough money. So you're gonna go to Pope. You're gonna take out a loan to get the slave, right? But now the person who's giving you the loan How he know he gonna get the money back from you? You buy a slave in New York, you're going all the way to Alabama. How is he gonna make sure he gets the money from you? So then, what you had with these banks, they would say, okay, well, Jr's getting a slave, Steven's getting a slave, Jason's getting a slave. So we're gonna take all those accounts and put them into these packages called derivatives, right? This way, everybody gets a little bit of the money back from each of these three people, paying back to the bank. And that structure is what they use to make the mortgage back the federal backed mortgage loans that crashed the economy in 2008. That was a structure that they used where you package a whole bunch of different mortgages into one thing, and then multiple people could invest into that, and as long as people are paying their mortgages, they get paid out. Then what happened in 2007, 2008, we had a huge recession, nobody could pay their mortgages, and it all crashed. Well, they got that structure from loaning slaves. Bank of America, they got money from slavery. I think Wells Fargo too, or another bank, but a bunch of these banks, they ended up getting their structures and their ability to sell insurance through slavery because you used to insure slaves. So if one got injured, it was cheaper to throw them into the ocean, feed them to the sharks, than it was to keep that injured
And you
slave.
get paid off of them.
Exactly.
And now that's not just the mortgage-backed loans. That trends into life insurance. That's how it came
Yep.
to pass. They would get paid. So it's funny because nowadays the majority of us don't have life insurance, right?
We,
But what back in the days during the slave trade, what would happen is the owners would insure their slaves. And them insuring their slaves, when something would happen to the slave, they would make money from it. And they would pass the wealth that they incurred from the loss of those slaves onto their children, onto their children's children, and children's children.
Here's how slavery changed the Bible in America. In the Bible, if you were a Christian, you couldn't be a slave. So a black woman in 1632 sued the state of Massachusetts for her freedom because she was a Christian. So she won a lawsuit. They went in and changed the Bible to take that out. And then it was also a statute that, like, if you were born to somebody who wasn't a slave, they could free you. So they changed the law so that, because before it was you, like if your mother wasn't a slave, you couldn't be a slave.
Right,
So they changed the law so that now the only way you can get free is if the father emancipated you, and it couldn't be through women. But that's also where the big stigma came from people, from like slave masters not wanting the black male slaves to be around the white women, because if they procreated, then those kids would not be able to go back into the slave structure because they'd be free. So I'll stop talking. I'll get into my slavery bag.
now that was a good history lesson. And final thing. What are your opinion on these protests that are going on? Quickly.
Okay, so I'll start. So I believe that protest is something that is done in order to raise awareness on a subject when people are simply not listening. When it's something that is occurring every day in people's face, it's like an elephant in the room, where it's like it occurs every day, and you have a mass amount of people that refuse to acknowledge that it occurs. And so from that, people begin to protest. And then when you protest, if nothing changes, it gains more momentum, it gains more traction, it gains more energy, it gains so many different components that add to things that form resistance, form revolution when people are unheard in terms of things that are affecting their communities, especially something as people that are being killed by law enforcement officials.
All right. So, do you agree with the rioting, the burning of the buildings? Or do you think that there's a place for that?
Yes.
Yes. Do you?
Absolutely. Everybody thinks that the Voting Rights Act got passed because I had a dream. No, it didn't.
It got passed because Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, and our people fucked shit up for 6 days straight.
That was a Civil Rights Act. You're right about that.
Yeah.
But the Voting Rights Act, close.
Oh, yeah,
it
Voting
was
Rights Act, right,
the
right,
Selma March. Everybody think it was the I Had a Dream speech and the Selma March.
Boycotted for a year.
Yeah, first off, folks need to understand, they weren't just marching for any reason. They would go together to the post office to register to vote. And it was easier to go as a group because the cops would be less likely to beat you than go as one person. So that's what we're doing. But what actually got the Voting Rights Act passed was after they bust all those people ass that day, the cops, right? The Deacons of Defense came back there. And Frank Williams from North Carolina, NAACP came. And they were not nonviolent. They were shooting back. And they shot a couple of cops. And they whooped a lot of ass. And after that, they said, oh, we got to do something because they're not turning back. And that got the Voting Rights Act passed.
And we're not saying that people should go out and start shooting cops up. but you need to take proactive measures, not reactive measures, to ensure that your people, that your community isn't being grossly infringed upon.
Guys, I want to thank you very much. This has been an informative discussion on Juneteenth, voting rights acts, because there's some stuff that I honestly didn't know, especially about the drink. So again, Stanley, Pope, thank you guys.
Thank you for having
This
us.
has been another episode of Bridging the Gap podcast, brought to you by sharpbridgeboys.com. Everything you see on the counter is available to you. Once again, guys, thank you very much. Appreciate you. And let's keep the fight. All right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.